episode of Sisterpiece with me, Khizra Munir, and my guest today is Sahar Habib Ghazi, who is a journalist, a person of the internet. I learned that from Sawawana Malik. She's a stand-up comedian also with Auratnath, and if you are on Instagram like I am all the time, she is Mama2030. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode, Sahar.
Thank you for having me.
So I'm going to jump right into it. Sahar, so you've been doing journalism for more than a decade, and not just sort of like behind the scenes, but also visibly like on television. So you helped launch Dawn News. How did you suddenly go from doing news and being a journalist suddenly showed up on our Instagram doing funny videos, playing these characters, doing satire, social commentary? How did that transition happen?
Right. So, I started very much as a mainstream media journalist, I would say pre-social media, 2005. And so it was a very different era. And I think lots of different women exist in all of us. And we've lived many different lives. And what the public ends up seeing may end up being, one element of us. And for many years, I think, just in terms of my public social media accounts, folks were only seeing my journalism, or people who are familiar with the profession knew about my journalism. But there have always been other sides of me. And I made a conscious decision in 2020, actually, of making this account called 2030 Mama, which is where I wanted to show, I wanted to start a conversation about parenting, because I felt like I was parenting differently and I didn't have the kind of community I wanted around parenting. So that was my intention with the account. And it just so happened that, there are other aspects of me. In 2019, I started doing stand-up comedy with Auratnath. I've always been like a funny person, but I never really like made it into something until that year. So it just so happened that when I made this account, in my process of discussing parenting, I discussed journalism, and then sometimes I package things in a funny way. And I do tend to I've always tended to when we'd be like discussing heavy politics in the newsroom and everything, I just subconsciously take on accents and characters without knowing. And I think a lot of that has to do with just my background. I've lived half my life in the US and half in Pakistan, and I've lived in different cities. And whether you're in Pakistan or in your different cities in the US, whether it's like the East Coast, the West Coast, wherever you are, the accent is different. And because I moved around so much, I'd always take on the accents of the places I was living. Like I grew up in Islamabad. So when I'm in Islamabad, you hear me speaking Urdu, you'll be like, complete Islamabadi. You hear me speaking Urdu in Karachi, you'll be like, oh, complete Punjabi, complete Karachiite. You take me to Lahore, suddenly be like, ye Punjabi hai. The tinges always subconsciously end up coming into my accent. So it was very natural for me to kind of grab onto that Synth Club uncle character or the Hum TV Puppo or, the Defense Club ki auntie. Like I hear these things and then I can like mimic them.
And so what does 2030 stand for?
So 2030 is the year that my daughter is going to be 18 years old.
Oh.
And so, when I had her, motherhood is like this amazing process. It's biological, it's psychological, it's spiritual that happens to a woman when she has a child. And so I was going through many different changes, but also I felt like all the tools that are given to us around motherhood, whether we're learning it, from books or we're learning it from our ancestors or our parents or our community, I felt like it wasn't going to give me the kind of relationship I wanted with my daughter. Or it wasn't going to give me the kind of the future that I wanted to foster for my child, So for me, it was important to kind of like really understand who she is, who her soul is, and help her on that journey. Like that's what I think a parent is, essentially. I'm like, it's not about like, oh, aapne upar se unko ye philosophies deni hai, unko ye ideology deni hai, unko ye religious principles dene hai. For me, it's mostly I want her to decide what path she wants to be on. And I also want her to be a kind and good human being, because I think the world needs that. If we're going to be having children just for the sake of legacy or just for the sake of carrying on the family name, I mean, that's not something I buy into. But for me, if I can have a child who is going to be the kind of person who can bring love and kindness close to the people around her, or become an inventor, or do something that would benefit humankind, then that's something that I kind of have buy-in for.
Right.
So I became a mom at 30. So it was a conscious decision for me to go into motherhood and have a child. So it was a very different idea. So with me, with 2030 mama, my idea always was that I'm raising a future adult. In Pakistan, they बहुत infantilize करते हैं बच्चों को till they're like, till my age, 41 लोग कहेंगे बच्चे.
If you're living at home, you're still a child.
Well, not even if you're living at home, because I've been living outside of my home since I was 18, and there will still be elders around me who will think that they can infantilize me, or they feel a need to, if they feel like, anything about my energy or my accomplishments or the way that I'm being perceived in society is maybe perhaps bigger than they would want it to be, because in the social structure, elders are supposed to get the most respect. And if I start getting respect for my accomplishments, there will always be people who will be like, oh, chalo, isko thoda sa niche pull kar le. In the larger structure. And I think it's because there's this heavy reliance in desi society on elders' identity being linked to respect. And it's unfortunate, and I feel it now that I'm 41 now, because in desi society, औरत expire हो जाती है ना. She's that medicine जो बस अलमारी में पड़ी हुई कोई इस्तेमाल नहीं करता type thing. Like that is the thinking around a 40 plus woman. And so now I'm beginning to understand what elder Pakistanis go through in Pakistan, or elder desis go through in South Asia above the age of 40. How they're perceived. They feel like, oh, हमारी कोई जगह नहीं है, which is bullshit. Like, I feel like I have a life to live. Excuse me.
Yes. Oh,
I'm only, if I really think about it neutrally, inshallah, my lifespan will be the average lifespan of someone like me, which is around 80. So I've only reached my midpoint. मेरी तो आधी जिंदगी पड़ी हुई है. So, so if I look at it like that, I've got a whole half life to live. I don't have to be, leaning heavily on the respect that is given to elders. I can actually be accomplishing new things and having new dreams and new accomplishments and like paving new avenues in my life, learning new skills. So I don't feel like, that trope that is put on elder people needs to be there. So coming back to 2030 Mama, which is the question you asked me, there's so much ageism that happens in Desi society. And for children specifically, I feel like बहुत ज़्यादा infantilize किया जाता है. ये babies हैं, ये babies हैं, ये babies हैं. So I wanted to always parent her with the mindset that one day she's going to be 18. I want her to be responsible. I want her to feel like she has the tools and also the mindset to make the kind of decisions that can lead to a wonderful and beautiful life for her, not for me. So that's kind of where 2030 comes from.
So is one of those tools complete transparency about your whole sort of, how you grew up, your marriage, you did a whole series of stories and about how you navigated that aspect of your life. And of course, since you have a publication, she will one day have access to all of this. Is that one of the tools that you want her to have that access to your experiences so that she can make mindful decisions or she can have some perspective or context regarding her mother and why her mother is a certain way?
Yeah. Certainly, but when it's the right time. So she doesn't have, nor does she have interest in my account. She finds my account totally cringe, by the way.
Okay.
And she's a normal kid, and that's totally a normal response. But in an age-appropriate way. So she knows about my life in a very age-appropriate way. She knows I'm a journalist. Most of the time, I edit some pretty harsh stories. So she'll come to me and be like, Mama, can you help me with homework? And I will be like editing this heavy duty story on gang rape, right? And she's like, oh, can you help me with history homework? And I'll be like, obviously I'm not the mindset for it, but I'll never say to her, oh my God, I'm editing this horrific thing. I'll be like, I need space right now. Give me some time. I can come to you in an hour or 30 minutes or whatever. So I'm very careful about what aspect of me she knows. And, but she also knows that I do heavy stuff. So she knows the headline of the stuff that I'm doing, but she doesn't necessarily know the headline because headlines these days are pretty horrific. Yeah. But she knows basically कि मैं क्या कर रही हूँ, but the details in an age-appropriate way बताना चाहिए. And I really, really believe that. She knows a lot about my struggles, but she doesn't know about them in a way that is overwhelming for her or stops her from centering herself in her life. She is the star of her life, and that's the way I want it to be. I do not want me and my struggles or my successes to be the star of her life. You get what I'm saying?
That's very fascinating because that is literally parenting 101 in Pakistan, isn't it? कि हमने तुम्हारे लिए इतना कुछ किया है, and is this how you're going to repay us, or you're not going to do this, but we did so much. It's like parents have a certain set of receipts that they keep, which they will pull out the day you do not subscribe to how they want you to turn out. And this is like a complete sort of ripping that to shreds and throwing it out.
Yeah, I think when parents show receipts, that's a parenting failure. I'm going to apologize beforehand. If I say anything right now that triggers a parent or feels like too strongly, when I'm writing on my account, मैं बहुत सोच समझ के बोल रही होती हूँ, but I'm like literally in the middle of my workday. It's Friday. I'm like so done with life.
Do it.
I'm not going to be censoring much. You might find some of my stuff a little harsh.
No.
But honestly, it's like me doing radically different desi parenting. And I call it desi parenting because I want to call it desi parenting because I do believe in a lot of aspects of community and love and all the other things that, hospitality that desi-ness brings to us. But I want to like reconfigure the way that we desi parent. And so for me, I think it's very wrong when parents ehsan jatate. A big red flag for me. Another big red flag for me is when parents use language like, usne hame kabhi tang nahi kiya. As if a child's existence is taking up space in your life. No. A child brings their own space into their own life, and you have to support and nurture their space to be bigger and better. You should never say कि बच्चा मेरे space में आ रहा है. That mindset is wrong, and also it creates too much negative energy in the relationship and also in the child's sense of self-worth, because we have to be the main characters of our own lives to fully feel like we have ownership of our lives. And if we don't feel like we have ownership of our lives, we're not going to make the best decisions for ourselves and also for the larger community around us. We're just not going to do them. We're going to feel powerless.
And we're going to feel like everything is transactional or conditional.
And that's another big thing. So this is why I say I want to like call it desi parenting, because I feel like हमारी जो desiness है ना, what is the difference between how हम Eastern या Western culture की बात करें broadly? हम कहते हैं Western culture is very transactional, or Eastern culture is about long-term relationships. It's about roots. It's about the big picture. मुझे लगता है हमारी आजकल की जो parenting है या फिर पिछले 2-3 generation से I would say कि उस पर colonial impacts आए. हमें नहीं पता honestly how our grandparents were parented, great grandparents were parented. But I think from our grandparents forward, it's been heavily, or I'm a little older, so I should say our great-great-grandparents, we don't know how they were parented. We only really have knowledge from our great-grandparents forward. And that was complete colonial era. And we see the colonial era impacts in our schools and our roads, in our infrastructure, in our government, but we do not know how that deeply entered the family unit. And so this whole transactional thing, कि बच्चे तंग कर रहे हैं या receipts देना, I feel like a lot of it comes from a colonial schooling mindset, which is pretty much just 150 years old. Yeah. So pre-colonial era, perhaps we were parenting different. We were parenting with love and nurturing and the community, and we understood that these kids are leading their own lives and they have their own lights. And अगर हम even if you come into like spirituality, which was in this region that we live in, it was cross religions, right? So if you think of Sikhism, or if you think of Islam, or if you think of Hinduism, all these religions that were existing here, they had this level of spirituality, which we see still evident right now in some of the architecture in these places. And unka jo principle tha na around like community, love and nurturing, it was a very nurturing kind of emotion and feel. And so I'm pretty sure that's how parenting happened 150 years ago, but we lost our way. And I'm hoping that, we can kind of get back to that because our kids need it.
100%. Okay, Sahar, so one of the things I really enjoy on your Instagram is when you post about your food and the kind of food that you prepare at home. And the kind of food you've ensured your daughter enjoys. Like, my favorite part is when you tell her to make her own snack. And suddenly, this child has like kachi sabzi on her plate and like radishes or like celery, and I'm just like, what? If I was left to my devices, I would not come up with that snack. But this child is consciously preparing a really healthy snack for herself. How did you do that?
Oh my goodness. So, I mean, a child and their food philosophy, there's so many layers and levels to it. And it starts from the moment they're born, before they can even feed themselves. So I always wanted to really focus on nutrition. All of us desis from our own families, we have our own traumas. And I think one of the biggest traumas that I have that I still kind of struggle with is the food culture that I inherited in my house, which very much focuses on fasting or feasting and not Ramzan fasting, matlab ke bhuka, faka, dieting, right? And so, and it's like the kind of culture of the house, and I really struggle with it. And so I didn't want to give that to my child. On the other side, I've had some very real nutrition problems in the sense that I have endometriosis, which manifested in a lot of digestive issues. So, there have been points in my life where, my medical reports that I'm malnourished, and I did not look malnourished. But you know what I'm trying to say? My food was not digesting properly. So I had to be really conscious of the nutrients that I was consuming in my food from the age of 25 onwards. I had to, and also I made some really bad decisions in my teenage years and early 20s because of this whole dieting culture that I grew up with. People who are my age will be familiar with this tomato soup diet. Abhi recently someone...
Cabbage soup diet.
So yes, it was a tomato soup base with cabbage in it.
Yeah.
Basically 80 calories hote the us bowl mein. And it was this printout that went around in the 90s. And it was, I would say, agar aapne kisi ko malnutrition dena na, to aap ye diet dein. Usme hota tha ki aap bananas kha rahe hain ek din, agle din aap yeah, it was just like bananas one day, and then it was this tomato soup. You're filling yourself up with that, and maybe at the end of the day you get a salad and a bit of meat, and it was like 3-4 days of like no meat. And then anyway, it was a very imbalanced diet that many people in the 90s across Pakistan were doing, and it was this printout that was being exchanged. And iske farak naam hai. If you ask anyone around my age group, they'll know about it. Now, and it was very unhealthy. I remember my father once when he found out that we were doing it, and I was like, I don't know, 11 or 12. Not much older than my child right now. Yeah.
Very young.
Yes, very young. My father was like, you're a growing kid, and he was like, no dieting allowed. So, there was this double thing going on in my house. My father was like, you're not allowed to diet because you're a growing child. And then there was another thing going on in my house where we're hiding and we're doing these diets because it was the culture of the house also. So badi hame mixed signaling mil rahi thi about it. And also we had to I remember there was a certain level of my father can't find out that we're doing this also because he didn't approve of it. And actually he still doesn't. He's so cute. I remember whenever I'd complain about a little weight here and there, he'd be like, oh, it's just baby fat, it's gonna melt, it's baby fat, it's gonna melt. So when I was 9 months pregnant, Nava wasn't coming out, and everyone was like, Pata nahi, she was a week late. So my father's like, okay, let's go for a hike. And I was living right outside of San Francisco then. We went in this national park and we were walking, and I'm literally huge. And we took a picture together, my father and me. And my father says to me afterwards, and I was like, ekdam se, especially when a woman is pregnant. I mean, until my 7th month, you could barely tell that I was pregnant. I remember, people would be like, oh, are you pregnant? But then I really put on a lot of weight the last couple of months. So, I was just showing concern, oh my God, how am I going to lose all this, blah, blah, blah. And my father's like, it's baby fat, it'll melt away. I said, you've literally been saying that since I was 9. It really is this time. So that was kind of my father's thinking around it. He's always been like, it's very important until you're a growing age to keep your nutrition in mind. Now, coming back to now with my child, I wanted her to have all the tools to have a healthy, nourishing lifestyle. So when she was little, I remember the first time when we were transitioning, I nursed her for 5.5 months. Doctors recommend that you exclusively breastfeed if you can for about 6 months, and then introduce solid foods. And when you introduce solid foods, different pediatricians have different thoughts about this, but many of them recommend you start with vegetables and not sweets because, just in terms of the taste palette. So we introduced carrots to her first, and she immediately spit it out, koi interest nahi. And then thoda humne rice cereal diya ya oatmeal diya. Wo usne kha liya. Because she spat out all the carrots, I think initially I tried steaming them, and then I tried to do something else with them. She just kept on spitting it out. So then we went to bananas. And, already I felt, as a new mom, I felt, oh, this is a failure because the doctor told me, pediatrician told me to stay away from fruits. But she spat that out also. So I was like, oh crap, is she going to be the kid who's only into carbs? Main kya karungi? How am I going to nurture a healthy eating habit within her. And then after that, every single vegetable we gave her, she ate up. You know?
Like all of a sudden.
Yeah, I mean, so it was just that she still doesn't like bananas and carrots.
Okay.
Abhi bhi agar main usko bananas or carrots do, she'll be like, mujhe nahi
Is
chahiye.
it like a texture thing?
Texture thing, taste thing, she's 10 years old, she will tell you it's an everything thing,
Yeah.
right? She just doesn't like them. And so the thing with kids is that you just have to keep on trying, and then you also have to be like, the mindset has to be around like the scientific reasons behind it. I did not give her any salt and sugar for her first year, like didn't even give it. Like when we'd come to Pakistan in the middle, my nanu would try to give her pulao with salt, and I'd be like, nahi nanu, if you want to give her pulao, you can give her pulao with no salt, you know? And it was this back and forth, ki kuch nahi hota, usko zaiqe ka nahi pata chalega. I'm like, she's one. She's got a completely different taste palette. So yeah, till she was 2 actually, I didn't give her any salt and sugar. I used to make her these vegetable fruit smoothies, and I used to freeze it and used to call that ice cream. Sometimes I would just freeze fruit in ice and give her ice cubes and used to call it ice cream. Till she was 3, she didn't know what ice cream was, you know? So like, you can give your child the tools.
I'm cracking up at all of this.
Yeah, you can. And then, you know, कभी कभार पाकिस्तान से लोग visit आते थे और फिर कहते थे, हाय किस किस्म का जुल्म हो रहा है, बच्चे पे जुल्म नहीं हो रहा था. She was learning how to eat properly and also not to kill her taste palette, because हम क्या शुरू में करते हैं, हम उनको इतने बिस्किट देते हैं, हम उनको इतने fake preservative भरे and sugar भरे चीजें देते हैं कि they don't even know what their taste palette is. And Nava, till now, you know, you said she has a healthy taste palette, or when you see the vegetables, actually she has a curious taste palette. If I was to like describe her taste palette, she's curious. She wants to try food. And then also we've given her the thinking and the knowledge that your plate needs to be 50% fruits and vegetables, a quarter carbs, and a quarter protein. And she knows the math on this since she was little. Wow. We didn't feed her. I was never the mom who was running after the kid with a Navala, beta Navala khalo. As soon as she had her pincer grip, which is when they can pick up food, she was feeding herself. You look at her videos when she's 10 months old, she's feeding herself. She had a nanny who sometimes would like to pick up the spoon and side pe karo, you know? So kids want to be independent.
Yeah.
I remember sometimes when we were living in the US, we'd go to desi parties, and if Nawa would be sitting and eating, people were fascinated by her healthy little lunchbox or palette or what her choices were, but comments aate the ki she's a messy eater. I remember this Pakistani woman once said to me, Pakistani origin woman said, कि, you know, इसलिए मैंने अपने बच्चों को Montessori में डाला because उनको इंसान के बच्चे बना देते हैं, सिखाते हैं किस तरह खिलाना है. And I was immediately like, you know, for me, I don't care whether she's a messy eater. I care if she's a healthy eater. And that's I don't care what people around are saying, oh, gun macha rahi hai, falana dhamkana. Obviously, as a mother, I'm responsible. I'm never going to take my kid to a place and uske gande haath kisi ki white sofa pe is tarah kare. No. And actually, my child knows. And I had all these things, you know. It wasn't just me. It was also her father. When we used to go to someone's house and we'd take her, we used to make sure that, you know, she has all the tools not to make a mess, because she was a messy eater, you know. So we gave her those tools. Like, you know, if you want to take a mat and put her down to eat somewhere, there's a mat underneath her. And then you just roll it up and put it in your diaper bag. Yeah. We did not focus on, oh, she has to be a clean eater and not a messy eater, taki log baatein na kare. Yeah. You know, I'm least interested in log baatein na kare. And I think that the sooner women or any Pakistani starts freeing themselves of judgment and log kya kahenge, the closer you get to becoming the person you want to be and the person you're intended to be, you know? It's like ye cheezein, caring about how someone, like, you know, jab log kehte hain, oh, uska bachcha badtameez hai ya phir kitni badtameezi se khana kha raha hai, I'm like, all of that judgment looks poorly on the person saying it. It doesn't look poorly on the parent or the child. Yeah, yeah. You know, why do we care so much about how something looks as opposed to like what something actually is? Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. And it's very interesting also, because I love watching like the parts where Nava puts together her own. Okay, Sahar, so one of the things that I actually also come to your account for is that, and I know it's probably taxing for you, but like you put in the emotional labor of actually sort of breaking down events or situations and going into in-depth explanations on certain issues. And एक छोटी सी चीज समझाने में, even to like on a casual situation, is exhausting for me if I wanted to like explain something. But you go through like threads and threads, and that comes with first doing the research, then sort of processing how you're going to deliver it. that sounds exhausting. While it is not your job to be doing it, but it is just that you're doing it. Where do you come up with the energy to do that? Why do you do it? And does it pay off? Like, what do you get out of it? Because it is emotional labor. Whether it's about a news fact, whether about women's sexual health, you talked about your endometriosis a lot, or a recent situation which we'll get into.
Right. So I think when it comes down to it, the profession I've chosen for myself, which I've like pretty much done half of my life, it comes with a certain skill set, and also it comes with a certain आपकी जो अंदर से एक need होती है. So I always say I became a journalist because I'm basically a curious person, right? So for me, I want to get to the facts and the core of an issue, and I want to understand it. Sometimes I feel like because I'm on social media or because I'm accessible, my DMs start filling up with certain misinformation, disinformation, or certain questions. So usually when I reach a certain threshold where I'm getting that kind of feedback, and it's combined with my natural instinct to be curious and to get to the bottom of an issue, that's usually where the impetus for that kind of thread will come from or something. Or I'll feel like something has been elevated really, really high in society as a conversation, but because of the work that I do, advice, or my other reporting, I already know what the facts or the core of the issue is. So it's just a matter of me writing it down and addressing that misinformation, disinformation, or the kind of off-framing of the issue that I feel needs fixing or needs like another light to be put on it. And also for me, the basic thing is I just want people to be asking the right questions.
Like you did a whole series on women's sexual health and like pleasure and all of these things.
Yeah.
Which nobody talks about. And I'm pretty sure you got a lot of interesting DMs on that.
I got mostly positive feedback on that. I've nurtured a community that is amazing. I have a lot of men that follow me. I have a lot of women that follow me. I have a lot of younger people that follow me. And I am pretty particular about noisy people, people who attack me, or people who misconstrue my intentions. I just block them. So, I don't know how many people I've blocked, but the last time I checked, it was close to 1,000, and that was a while back, like when I had half the followers that I have. So you can imagine, like I'm pretty good about creating a nurturing community for me. So I didn't get a lot of negative feedback on it, but particularly on women's health, what I found was, it was even before I launched this account, because I have endometriosis. First of all, it's such a taboo. I was diagnosed with it when I was 29. It's such a taboo. When I said, I was diagnosed with it, everyone's immediate reaction was like, hi, logon ko na batao, or chala jayega. Like I would get so much like, koi baat nahi, ye wazifa kar lo, ye potli kar lo, ye falana, ye dhumkana. And until I didn't start like years later drawing a boundary with people, because there was this thing in my life where my friends and my family who I love and I trust, every time they'd see me, they'd just kind of be like, hey, don't talk about like this, and here, try this totka. I was receiving too many unsolicited totkas, and it pissed me off. And I've had 3 surgeries, for endometriosis. Right now, I don't have a lot of pain symptoms, but the pain that was around this disease, it was an untold story of my life that really impacted me, but I felt like there was no freedom for me to talk about it, because everyone, if I even mentioned, it'd be like, oh, ye totka kar lo, as if ye condition totke se chala jayega, ye pani se peene se chala jayega, ya ye herb se chala jayega. So I had a lot of anger in me about how it wasn't being accepted by my closest circles.
Yeah.
But I was living through it in the sense that sometimes I'm a highly productive person and I managed to find these online editor jobs in my life so that I can literally, sometimes I would be so swollen is tarah for 6 weeks that I would be working like this, but I never did not log into work. There were months where I'd end up in the ER 4 or 5 times within 6 weeks, and then on the other side, I'd have family or friends treating my condition with these just frivolous kind of non-scientific things, and also being like, because it's a condition that impacts the reproductive area of a woman, or can impact. Now, my endometriosis has never been in my tubes. Sorry. My endometriosis has never been in my tubes, right? So from a diagnostic standpoint, doctors have never said that it impacts my reproductive health. But I felt like everyone around me was just looking at my endometriosis from my ability to have kids, and it's a very dehumanizing thing when you have such extreme symptoms from something and people are just like, shh, baat na karo, because of some misinformation they have in their head.
You had a daughter also.
I mean, wo to side pe baat na, like it's, you don't want to get into like why people are irrational.
Yeah.
They're driven by whatever, right? So for me, it was very important. But what I noticed was, the ek side pe ye chal raha hai, like mere closest circle is tarah ki baatein kar rahe hain. On the other side, I noticed that I started getting just random queries from people being like, hey, so-and-so told us that you have endometriosis, and they'd start asking me questions. And their number one question was always, hey, is sex painful? And I was like, not for me, but if it is for you, then maybe your endometriosis is like deeply impacting areas that come into contact when you have penetrative sex. So go see a doctor, right? So, then I started realizing that ek side pe people are over focusing on this reproductive health aspect. Dusre side pe, there are so many women that are coming to me and saying ki, oh, sex is painful. And then oftentimes when I'd ask them ki aapke paas ye dusre symptoms hain, and they didn't have any of the other endometriosis symptoms, they just had perhaps vaginismus or something like that. And too many queries like that started coming to me. So I'm like, okay, this is a problem where there are too many desi women who have pain with sex. And also, like, as a journalist, I got super curious that suddenly, if they know that I have endometriosis, they feel like for a stranger they can message and ask such a personal question, as opposed to going to a doctor and saying to your doctor कि मुझे ये मसला है, as if like there's something about me that makes me more non-judgmental than a doctor. So all of those reasons, many, many years of being in this space of those extreme, reactions, when I did that piece on endometriosis, I felt like I wanted to address it. And, I did a comedy video on endometriosis also, like the ridiculous things I've heard from close ones or heard from doctors, because also it's a very understudied disease.
Yeah.
And also my journey, because the first time I had the surgery done, I made some bad decisions in terms of the kind of surgery I was going to get, because I didn't have complete information, or I didn't have good information. It's a very understudied disease. In 2011, when I first had the surgery, I had excision done, which is when I didn't have excision. I had, they blasted with a laser. So it's a laser surgery. And it's pretty much the equivalent of endometriosis. Choti cheez hoti. It's microscopic, right? So it sometimes it doesn't even come up on scans. Back in 2011, scan pe bhi nahi aata tha. Ab scans have become better. So you can see, sometimes you can see it. But they're these microscopic things, and they blast it with a laser. It's the equivalent of dropping a cluster bomb on a small little problem, right? So that's the surgery I had done back in 2011. After that, my other two surgeries were excision, where they take a tiny little scissor and they just like clip off the little bit of endometriosis. So very different strategy, but the surgeons back in 2011, or the literature that was available on the internet, which was like, it didn't have this kind of information.
Yeah.
So I didn't make the best decision. I didn't choose the right surgeon. Also in 2011, when I was getting my first surgery, it was a diagnostic thing. Basically, the doctor said, we suspect you have endometriosis. We're going to go in there with a camera and a couple of cuts, and we're going to see if you have it. If you have it, we're going to take it out. I didn't even ask them, how are you going to take it out? Because I didn't even know that was a question one has to ask. And back in 2011, if you do like a, look at the internet from 2011, there wasn't this kind of information available, that it's best to get an excision and not a laser surgery done. So really big thing. And you may know your friends, endometriosis is so common now.
Yeah.
I would say, they say 1 in 10 women have it, but I think that's bullshit. From my circle, I feel like 1 in 4 or 5 women have it.
No, 100%.
So I think that this was information that I had that I wanted to share. And as I said, Pele, once you let go of this judgment and log kya kahenge and all this stuff, it's so freeing. Then you just kind of go to like your core. And my core basically is, I'm a curious person. I also want to help people. I'm totally a helper.
Yeah.
You were like, hey, emotional energy kya? So my struggle in life has been like drawing red lines with myself.
Yeah.
कि मैं अपने आप को like not give too much of myself.
Yeah.
To help people because मुझे है मसला कि I'm overly a helper in my mindset.
Okay, so recently there was some online drama about like you were attacked by someone, the whole cancel culture situation. So I was watching the whole situation and I watched it escalate. And I was just like, this is so scary. Like after a certain point, after the, oh my God, how dare she? Oh my God, what is she doing? There came a point where I was like, this is bordering on dangerous because this person has a massive audience. And when you realize that each one of those people is a physical being in person and everyone's sharing and resharing and everyone's sort of वो होता है ना जैसे ट्रम्प ने आके बहुत सालों से लोग अपने ओपिनियंस लेके तमीज से जिंदगी गुजार रहे थे और ट्रम्प ने आके उनके रिग्रेसिव ओपिनियंस को वैलिडेट कर दिया and suddenly he was like it's true political correctness, say what you want to say, your opinions are valid, be a jerk, just treat people however you want if that's what you believe. I feel like these people are doing that. And so regarding that whole scenario and that kind of behavior, how do you unpack that and what are the risks that are sort of associated with that?
Right. It's a multi-pronged question, but I think it comes down to
like there's so much I didn't even know how to word it in a question because there's so much to unpack.
Right. Because I'm a journalist and I've been a journalist for a while, 19 years, I've seen how the information economy has gone from, somewhat top-down regulation or information coming from media houses and journalists or state or people with power to becoming decentralized, right? And what's happened with decentralized is ek zamane mein propaganda used to be from the state. Now we're seeing all kinds of narratives from all kinds of different characters. So there's a lot of noise. And when there's a lot of noise, what ends up happening is people get confused. And it's basically if you walk into a room where there's so much shouting and so much noise, what do? You leave the room. So that's the larger impact that this kind of stuff creates. So I'm very much focused on the larger impact that all this noise creates as someone who has been working in the information space for a while and someone who wants factual information to be in that space. I don't want noise. I want factual information so people can make informed decisions and live better and kinder lives. Like my intention is very clear. Now, coming to the specific person and this incident that you talked about, I disagree with the assumption that she has a lot of followers. I don't think she has a lot of followers. Yes, the numbers show that she has a lot of followers, but I did not personally get trolled by a lot of them. Okay. What that indicates to me is that her grain of influential followers is lower. So we have a lot of followers, but there are very few people who will take our information and act on it. So the percentage of people who are willing to act on that information, with one hand, I got trolling comments from her followers who bothered to DM me. Ek haath, right? Okay. And close to 100,000 number nazar aata. So very weak transfer over of actual action. Okay. Number one, when I'm looking at my safety concern. Number two, oftentimes when we have these like true believers, people who someone will incite and spread some hatred or false information, and so basically they're saying कि आप violent हो जाएं दूसरे बंदे के साथ. So एक तो वो information दे रहे हैं कितने लोगों ने tool पकड़ा 5 लोगों ने. उन लोगों से जिन्होंने tool पकड़ा, are they picking up that tool just because they're angry people and they just have bad days and they don't have a lot of power in their lives, so they're taking it out on me? I think that was the case with them. But being a journalist, I operate in a very messy information space. For example, this week, one of my reporters published this excellent piece into a really big story in India right now, which is a Sikh activist, 30 years old, firebrand, just like really charismatic. The Indian state is trying to arrest him, and they're calling him, a militant, and
they shut off the internet.
They shut off the internet for 27 million people. Really big story. So just on Twitter, I retweeted my reporter's thing, and then I got a lot of hate, which is like galiyan, shaliyan from Hindu nationalists who believe that any sort of Sikh separatism or any sort of Sikh activism goes against their state, and then they think that I'm a ISI agent, or they think I'm a Muslim warrior, and or because I'm a woman, then the galiyan, there's like a sexual element to it as well. And so I just I don't physically react to those things. So I don't physically I'm just so used to it right now. So with this specific case, it was a mother. My safety concern ended up becoming, she put some personal information about me out there. So my concern became like, oh, why is she digging into my personal information?
You literally talked about pollution.
Yeah. But then also like, a lot of her friends, and मैं क्या कहूँ कि like, when someone is being unsafe online and is exhibiting such behaviors, हमारे देसी social contract में हम लोगों को cut off नहीं करते, हम उनको करीबी रखते हैं, चाहे वो हमारी फुप्पी हो, दादी हो, फुप्पा हो, चचा हो, and then that extends to friends as well. So a couple of her friends who don't consider her safe sent me messages really concerned and gave me some more information. From that information, I gathered she knows a little bit too much about me, which became my concern. Because I have a certain level of privacy on my account. For example, I don't mention information like my, just like details about a lot of details about my child I don't mention for safety reasons, and also other details about my life like, there's so many things that I don't mention.
There's very little personal information about.
When you start looking at it, you see that, but a lot of people are like, "Sab kuch bol deti." I'm like, actually, no.
Yeah.
I because I'm also trained to work in the digital space, so I've had like safety training, multiple safety training, so I know कि कौन सी information online मैं डाल सकती हूँ जो weaponize होके मुझे मेरी family को harm पहुँचा सकती है और कौन सी नहीं. So I'm very careful about what I put on and who in my really close circle I put on, and with their consent. Like I don't put anything from Nava without like having a conversation with her, and she also didn't exist on social media. Not even like, oh, Nava said something cute before she was 7, because it was a conscious decision of mine. Until she can actually understand what it means, I'm not going to put her on. So that became a concern for me, so I stepped away from it. People come message me and they tag me, they're like, oh, she's at it again, saying something, blah, blah, blah. But once I knew that she has unnecessary information and she's dug up a little bit about me, then I'm like, they're not responsible, clearly. Mujhe nahi laga कि they're responsible from the kind of hyperbole they shared, which they deleted.
Yeah.
The kind of fake news they shared about me and they deleted. Then I was like, okay, it's best कि मैं it's sort of like, you're getting really close to a hornet's nest. If you poke it, it's gonna attack you. And then also like, I don't really think that she can cause me any harm with her misinformation. उसके वो जो 5 लोग हैं जो उसके हथियार उठा के मेरे DMs में आना चाहते हैं, I mean, that's nothing. Like I'm used to blocking such people. It's not a big deal for me.
Wow. How do you and I'm sort of de-escalating the whole thought process. How do you unwind? How do you switch off? Like I do remember this one story where you were like, there's so much going on and there's this and this, but I'm just not in a mental place to break it down for you guys. Not today. Not right now. I know there's a lot going on. Check the news. It's not going to come from me today. When is it that you reach that point?
Every day. Every day because I work in news, right?
Yeah.
So like, I have all these mini systems in place. Some people have like this thing where they step away from thing and they take a vacation a week long. I would say I take mini mental health breaks multiple times a day. The little things like in my office space, I have like a Nepalese singing bowl. If I'm doing something really heavy, then I'll like tong, tong, tong. It resets my nervous system. It resets my brain. I listen to like really, just like the kind of music that kind of takes me away from where I am at. I start my day, let me just tell you, I start my day completely away from everything. I'm 100% with my daughter, and it's very important for me. Like in my list of things to do, I wake up, I wake her up, I make her snack, I make her breakfast, and I take her to school. And I always say that first hour of my day from 7 to 8:15 when I drop her, I say it's about quality time. And that is something that like, it's about our relationship, and I have to show up in a way that is just happy and nurturing for her and me, because that's how I'm starting my day. So I'm very clear on that. And then when my day is ending, I always, try to do something for myself. If that is reading something that's kind of like resets my brain patterns, or if it's like taking a walk outside, or if it's like watching something, that is kind of de-escalates all the noise in my brain.
Yeah.
And then I do that, or I have a conversation with someone. And oftentimes like just at home, I feel like the last conversation of the day, whoever's having it or I'm having it with them, it's kind of like a good conversation to sleep well, because that's very important to me. I should always sleep. When I'm going to sleep, there shouldn't be noise.
What little time you get.
Yeah, there shouldn't be noise in my head.
That makes sense.
And then also, like, I go to the gym. I
Oh,
go
yeah,
for
you
sound
do.
baths once in a while. And yeah, there's just like little things here and there. And then also, I think the most important thing is knowing when your nervous system is escalating. So I'm very, very conscious of that. कभी कभार बैठे बैठे यू नो स्टूपिड ट्रोल कमेंट आ जाता है या फिर वर्क पे कोई टेंशन चल रही होती है और फिर या फिर क्या कहते हैं पानी ख़त्म हो जाता है घर का टैंकर बुलाना होता है सो एवरीथिंग कम्स एक वक्त एंड देन यूर जस्ट लाइक मैं किधर भागूं आई वांट टू रन योर नर्वस सिस्टम डेफिनेटली वांट्स टू लीव योर बॉडी So just being aware that I'm going through this and then maybe just getting up and saying, okay, I'm going to go upstairs and take a cold shower and then I'm going to de-escalate and make better decisions and be like, okay, number one priority is ordering tanker. Number two priority is not getting so angry at the work situation कि आप कुछ गलत कह दें. Because most work stuff is temporal. You just have to kind of get through it. You don't have to, you should never react in a work situation. And then number three, when you have time, block the trolls and don't look at social media until you do. So, it's just like tuk, 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 tuk.
That's amazing. And I feel like I've established myself as like super like Insta stalker. But I feel like that's the part I enjoy, that you manage to give away so much information in a way that when I want like quality information or like well-researched or very objective perspectives on news, I usually come to your account and I look for it, or I'm just like, I wonder if Sahar's commented on this. I wonder what she's going to say. So you've really sort of created that presence for yourself on Instagram, and I really appreciate that. And thank you so much for being here today. I feel like this was going to become a really long episode, so I'm just like, I'm not done. I have so many questions, but I have promised people it's not going to be a long podcast. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for taking out time.
Thank you.
I know this is a very tricky time. It's Ramadan time. Thank you so much for joining us for Sister Please today. This is Khizra Munir and Sahar Habib Ghazi, my guest. We'll catch you again later next week. Thank you.